Hi guys, it's Eric with the Film Photography Channel. Let's take a look at the Canon A-1. Okay, so this is the Canon A-1. It's a camera that Canon began manufacturing in 1978, and it's a pretty remarkable camera in a lot of different ways. The A1 was released after the AE1, which is one of Canon's most popular cameras ever. And the AE1 program was released after this. Oddly enough, you can buy this camera for less money than an AE1 program. But not because the AE1 program is a better camera, but because the AE1 program is in much lower supply. Why is the AE1 program in lower supply? Is because it fails and it does not hold up. So the fact that this is a better made camera actually lowers the value because there's more of them in the market, than if that makes any sense at all. It is the first 35mm SLR to incorporate a full program automated mode. And it's also happens to be the first 35mm camera to have the PASM settings, the PASM, which is program, aperture priority, shutter priority, manual. But Canon has a little bit different terminology that they use. Canon calls aperture priority, for example, aperture value, as you see right there. And they call shutter priority time value, as you can see there with the TV. And those two little symbols there, the little rectangle is supposed to represent, I guess, the shutter, and then the little circle is supposed to represent the aperture blades or the aperture opening. As you can see, this camera is absolutely beautiful. It's got bells, whistles, dials all over the place. Every setting that you could imagine is easily accessible through one of these dials. As you can see, the beautiful black paint on this Canon A1, I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. It is a nice looking camera. All right, and I've got the Canon FD f1.4, which is a gorgeous lens as well. I'll talk a little bit more about that and how these FD lenses work with this A1 body. But yeah, just to have a look around it a little bit. It's got the action grip here that's screwed on. Let's see if we can not too clumsily remove this in real time. Okay, so that came off fairly easily. To reveal the battery door. Now this battery door has a little tab there. It just opens up. Unfortunately, usually these doors are broken or missing in a lot of these cameras, so kind of look out for that. The first time I ever opened up this battery door, a little piece of plastic flew off, across the table there. But it did not stop the battery door from closing again, but there is a little chunk of plastic missing. And this action grip here, you can actually still get these new, and you'll notice there's a little solid mounting point there. And what you do is you slide it there, and bonus that it actually helps protect that kind of weak or fragile battery door. Anyway, so then screw this thing back in place there. Okay, all right, so now you've got the grip in place, and it does provide a nice little extra surface for your hands to kind of grip the camera, and it does give you a more confident grip. It's nowhere near like today's grips as are pretty common today, but you can see it does definitely add a little more depth there, so your fingers hold on a little better. And we'll just start up top here is your just little control center here. Now what you see in this window here is your shutter speeds as it's set. And this is a camera that's got a front thumb wheel. As you can see, I'm adjusting it there. And this thumb wheel makes your shutter speed adjustments when it's set to time value. And then when you switch over to aperture value, you see what happens. The wheel changes color in a neat little engineering trick from Canon. You see that change over there? All right, so it changes over to show you your aperture openings. Now, one little thing that I'll note about the aperture wheel here, as you can see, It's open up to 1.4, and there's a little dot before 1.4, which I can only imagine represents 1.2 if you have that type of lens. And then it stops down to just f22. You see there, and it's, you know, there's obviously lenses that have f32 and smaller. This power switch here, rotated all the way to the left right there is your power switch will be in the automatic mode for any one of those automatic settings, and even for the manual setting. Then center position there just locks it and keeps the shutter from accidentally firing, turns everything off. And then you've got a 2-second timer delay, and then you've got a 10-second timer delay that'll, as you can see, it'll blink slowly initially, and then in the last few seconds it'll blink fast. And you know, that's pretty typical for these older cameras. And right here, of course, is your film counter window. It goes from small to large, from 1 up to 36. And let's see, I'll show you the double exposure lever there. If you'll notice, your film counter window will not advance. Okay, here it is advancing, and if you push this in, then of course it won't advance, and it works really well. I don't know if a lot of people still use multiple exposures, but it's it works really well. The film advance lever here is really well, you know, really well made. It's got a good feel to it. The shutter release is great. You've got like a half press that you're very confident that you're not gonna accidentally do a full press. It works really well. And when you release the shutter, it's got a relatively short throw. That's one thing I noticed right away when I started using this camera, that the throw is really short and really precise. It feels really well engineered. The only one that I've used that feels actually better than this is the Nikon F3, because it's got those ball bearing loaded film advance lever. So the F3 is smooth as silk. It's definitely smoother than this camera, but this is about the second smoothest film advance that I've ever used. All right, so going back here, we talked about the aperture and aperture value, time value, and as we know, this is a fully program capable camera. It has a program automatic setting. So what you do is you switch back to the shutter speed, or shutter value, or time value rather, and then you move past the 1/1000th, and you see P for program. Now another thing that you have to note, on these FD lenses, these Canon FD lenses, they have to be set at the A setting for program mode to work correctly. All right, there's a little button right there, and this is really how this lens would stay 90% of the time. Just keep it in the A setting, and it actually locks in place. So you don't have to worry about missing that. So what the camera will do from this point forward and set for, you know, program, it'll pick the shutter and aperture combinations by itself, and it does not do program shift. And why is that? Because this camera was built in 1978. They hadn't quite figured that out yet. So it doesn't do program shift to allow you to select different combinations of shutter and aperture that would work together, but it does do a good job in selecting the proper exposures. Okay, moving on. Hot shoe with TTL contacts there. This is one of the first cameras ever to have like a dedicated flash that you just pop it on there, and you don't have to worry about making any adjustments. The camera will take over and adjust everything. I missed threaded tripod socket there. And by the way, this shutter release is really nice, because this camera is one of the first ones, again, to work with a half press to see some information in the viewfinder. But anyway, moving on, this switch here turns off the viewfinder display for different reasons. LEDs in the viewfinder were a brand new and radical thing back when this camera was built, and Canon was thinking maybe some people may not care for it, so they gave you the option to turn it off. And up top here, this beautiful engraved and painted ring here just simply shows your ASA setting. This is not a DX coded camera. The metering, it's got a great meter in it too. As you can see, it ranges from 6 to 12,800. So this camera has a really sensitive meter. It can meter in near darkness, and it's center weighted, which is pretty typical for cameras of this time, you know, from this era. But the metering is very accurate and very precise. Right here on the front of the dial, this metal tab right there, you just kind of press that in. It's kind of weird the way it's set up, but you press in this metal tab to release your ASA dial. And this simply is your exposure compensation plus or minus 2 stops, with the button right here releasing that dial, so you can adjust plus or minus. This is the plus side, this is the minus side. Okay, so the back of the camera, you can see here we've got a shutter curtain that simply closes off the shutter in case you're, you know, wanting to do like a long exposure and you don't want stray light to come in through the viewfinder, because your eye wouldn't be, you know, fixed there if you're doing like a 5 or 10 minute exposure or what have you. So it provides that. Funny enough though, it doesn't have a mirror lockup. Canon just didn't put a mirror lockup in this camera. So, you know, in some cameras, like I believe the Nikon F6, if you do like a timer, the mirror locks up when the timer starts. But if, you know, if you take a look at this particular camera, and I can put the 2-second timer on, trip the shutter, watch it blink, but nothing happened. It just took the shot, you know, as it normally, it doesn't lock up the mirror first. It's a shame they didn't quite, you know, catch that or develop that. All right, and film holder. Last thing I shot was some T-Max, as you can see. Serial number again engraved. Nice little scratch there around that's around the paint there. And I'll just note one thing here on the bottom. See this imprint here, and this, as a result of me mounting this little mini tripod here. You know, I put it on there nice and tight like you're supposed to, and it left the imprint in the paint. Now, having said that, the imprint is not quite as visible as it was a few days ago, which was the last time that I used the mini tripod. So I don't know, the paint, I guess, is some kind of weird soft paint, but it seems to recover from dents and or imprints, I guess you call them. And if you look really closely inside the big circle, there's some little tabs that are from a neck strap that I was using about a couple weeks ago. So the tabs, the little imprints from the tabs are just about gone, and the new imprint is there. So I don't know, whatever. The film rewind release button, and this is for your motor drive MA or your regular motor drive. And these are the contacts for the motor drive as well. And of course, a metal threaded tripod socket. All right, so let's look at the other side here. So a little more weirdness here from Canon on this camera. All right, so this is the depth of field preview lever. Okay, so as you push it in, you may notice that the aperture blades will go in, as you would expect for a depth of field preview. But this has a second function. Okay, so if you press down this button to release the aperture ring, right, and then lift up on this tab here, if you can see the little tab, and just push it on that, it stays in that locked position. And now, so you can see a live depth of field preview as you're using the camera in program mode. Oddly enough, it only shows you in the viewfinder the shutter speed. It doesn't show you the aperture that you're selecting, and there's no other indicator in the viewfinder to show you the aperture that's being used. You know. All right, so when you take it out of this crazy mode here, you just flip back the switch and you see it came back on its own. And then you put this lens back on the A setting, okay? And now when you look through the viewfinder, you're gonna get a bunch of E's, blinking E's. And so now you think your camera is just, you know, it's a paperweight. The electronics are fried or something's wrong with it. No, that's actually not the case. And it was a weird problem, and it was alarming when it first happened to me. And I did have to do some Googling to figure it out, because everything that I did, I could not get it off of the blinking E's. So the weird way that you fix that is you engage your double exposure switch here. You push that in, right? Advance the film, or you're not really advancing the film because the double exposure switch is engaged. And now, you know, I've got my normal display showing the shutter speed and the aperture. I don't know what that's about. It's just a weird thing that happens with this camera. But apparently it's not a malfunction, because it's pretty well documented, you know, and how to fix it is pretty well documented. On the side here, you've got an exposure lock button, which is actually the smaller button up top there. That locks the exposure to allow you to shoot or you know, recompose and then shoot. And this little button right here keeps the LED display in the viewfinder on at all times, as long as you're holding it down. Otherwise, you would have to do this, which is really clumsy. You would have to half press the shutter, make your adjustment here, right? Check it again by half pressing again. Oh, I don't like that, so let me make another adjustment. Let me half press again. And you're doing that whole thing, which is ridiculous. All right, so Canon was smart enough to put this button here, keeps the LED display lit, and then you can make your adjustments, and they're updated on the fly as you're turning this front thumb wheel. The changes are reflected in the LED inside the viewfinder. Okay, and that is a much better system. Now, if you're out of exposure range, the aperture will blink, but it won't tell you if it's too small or if it's too big. It won't tell you the reason that you're out of, you know, like under bad exposure or out of the range of the camera. It won't tell you that. It'll just tell you that, you know, that it's bad by blinking, and then you just have to turn until it stops blinking. To use this camera in the manual mode, what you do is you first press the little button there to take to free up the aperture ring, and then you put the top ring, you put that in the time value setting. All right. Okay, which is where it is right now. It's in the time value setting. So you've got your shutter adjustment up here and your aperture ring adjustment here, which is now you're starting to feel kind of normal until you look through the viewfinder and you see an M to let you know you're in manual mode, which is great. And you see an aperture number that's blinking, all right? And so you turn your aperture ring to you know, get a normal exposure, and nothing happens in the viewfinder. The viewfinder aperture display does not change, all right? So, but the fact that it's blinking tells you that you've got a bad exposure. So you can adjust your shutter speed here, and it's not blinking, so that tells me it's a good exposure. So I guess, you know, you would think you can go ahead and take the picture, but wait a minute. The camera says f9 and my lens says f16. It's not telling you what the lens is adjusted or what the aperture ring is set to. You need to just make the adjustment yourself. So you look through the viewfinder, see what the camera's telling you to set your aperture to, and as long as it's not blinking, you'll have a good exposure. Okay, so that's the weird manual mode that this camera has. So just don't use it in manual. There's bulb, and it's got 30 seconds. All the 1+ second shutter speeds are all set in yellow. And then once you get to the fractions, then they turn into white. And there's your flash sync speed of 1/60th. And there's your fastest shutter speed of 1/1000th. And of course, there's your program. If you look right here, for some reason, Canon felt compelled to provide a little cover for that front ring there, for that front dial. Let's talk about this FD lens here. The Canon has what they call the breech lock lens, and this beautiful silver ring here is what you use to attach the lens to the camera. The ring is kind of different because this ring turns on its own, independent of the rest of the lens. All right. When you take the lens off the camera, make sure that this breech lock here is actually locked, because right now it's loose and you'll never get it back on the camera. You just have to lock it in place till it clicks. When you put the rear lens cap on there, watch what happens there. You see how the lens kind of grabs onto the rear lens cap on its own. Anyway, beautiful camera. Love it with this gorgeous black paint. It's very capable. It's got a few quirks, but at the end of the day, if you just use it as an automatic camera, whether it be programmed, time value, or aperture value, in Canon speak, you're fine. I mean, that weird blinking E thing really doesn't come up unless you go and start using it in that weird, stop down manual mode. That's the only time you'll ever see that. Other than that, I really enjoy using this camera. It's a camera you can pick up. It's very responsive. It's got a perfect shutter button, and it's got a great meter that's not very easily fooled. It's got a absolutely wonderful viewfinder. That's a pretty good size viewfinder. It's easy to look through there even with glasses on. It's nice, bright, and clear. It doesn't hurt that this is a 1.4 lens. So anyway, so guys, at the end of the day, this is a great camera. It's got a big fan following. There's a lot of folks that absolutely love this camera, myself included. No, you can't fit every Canon lens that was ever made on this camera, but you can. There's no shortage of great lenses that you can use for this particular platform. And the camera's very smart, very responsive. It gets out of your way. As long as you stay away from those weird manual modes where that I talked about earlier, and that weird stop down program mode. I don't know who even would use it like that. But if you stick to the aperture value, time value, program mode, you're good to go. It's quick, it's responsive, it's a smart camera, and it looks great in this paint. All right, guys, so don't miss out on this one. Go get you a Canon A-1.